We are continuing here in our study of spiritual success and distress. We got over to lesson 10, and we've kind of been breaking this lesson down a little bit because I thought it was imperative that we think about Jesus, the servant, but also Jesus, our model. So this is going to be part 2 of lesson 10. And just look at these passages that encourage us to develop a heart and an attitude of a servant. And that is doing things for others. This lesson should create within us the awareness that Jesus is our personal example. And when we think about what Christ did for us and everything that he did while he was here in this world and continues to do in reality, is nothing more than just service. Jesus wanted us to be those who had the blessings of an eternal life in that heavenly abode, not be those found in separation from God. And we have this great and grand example. We talked about last week over in Matthew chapter 18, beginning in verse 21, that Jesus was one who forgave his fellow servants. And as a result, his master installed his impossible debt or and demanded immediate full payment because that slave did not do what he was supposed to do. We also talked about the passage over in Matthew chapter 20, starting down in verse 20 and going through verse 28, when it talked about servants who serve fellow servants. That Jesus emphasized to the 12 that the greatest person in his kingdom was the servant who served. And that is a key factor. This morning, I want us to look at the next one that's on the list. And we'll be going to the book of Mark, the 13th chapter. And we're going to be dropping down to verse 33. And it talks about being that watchful, prepared servant. You know, as we look at this passage, the commended servant is a servant who works as diligently in the master's absent as in the master's present. It begins there in Mark chapter 13 and verse 33. It says, "Take heed, keep on the alert, for you do not know when the appointed time will come." It is like a man away on a journey who, upon leaving his house and putting his slaves in charge, assigned to each one his task, also command the doorkeeper to stand on alert. So this individual was going to be gone for an appointed time. So he left these slaves things that they were to fulfill, things that they were to do. They were to continue doing what they were supposed to be doing, even though he was not going to be present. Because, and it's noted here, you don't know. Keep on the alert, for you do not know when the appointed time will come. In other words, when he'll be back. You need to have things done. But how many times do we see, even in our world today, individuals who are working at a job or taking care of a certain need or whatever it may be, that if the boss is gone, what's the old adage? The mice will play. Yeah, you know, the boss ain't going to be here for a while, so we don't have to worry about this. And we'll do that right before they get back. Right before the boss gets back, we'll get all this done. And then what happens? Well, it never gets done. Many times the boss shows back up and they have laxed in what they were supposed to be doing, and it caught them unaware because the boss returned. In verse 35 of this passage, in Mark chapter 13, it says, "Therefore be on the alert, for you do not know when the master of the house is coming, whether in the evening, at midnight, when the rooster crows, or in the morning, in case he should come suddenly and find you asleep. What I say to you all, be on the alert." So when we think about that, we just need to be doing what we're supposed to be doing, cruising along. But that's sadly not the norm for many today. They don't want to continue on. They want to get by doing the least amount that they can do to get by. Now, I was always raised and was the kind of individual that you're supposed to do everything that you're supposed to be doing, get that fulfilled, and maybe do a little extra. Now, that was the way that I was raised. You always did a little more. Was you raised that way? Lanita was raised that way too. We had the same parents or something. I don't know what the deal was. It's their fault. Both. No, there was no slacking off. No. You did everything you were supposed. If you had chores, you better get your chores done and something else. And if I was working somewhere in the job, we always did everything we were supposed to do and then done somebody else's work. But nowadays, sadly, guys, people just kind of say, well, and we'll talk about this in the next passage, but they try to get by doing the very least they could do. And we're going to see that in Matthew 24. We always try to do more. I know when I was in my youth, we would rush. When I worked at the grocery store, me and another young man who was a year older than I, we stocked the shelves. We sacked groceries, stocked the shelves, swept the floor, mopped the floor, the whole 9 yards. That was our duty. And that's what we did. But we tried to outdo one another. See who could put up the most groceries on the shelves. See who could get the floor mopped the fastest. And we would literally go like crazy to get all this done so we could do more than the other one. But that's not true in our world today. It's more to the idea, not everybody, I'm not going to lump everybody in this, but so many have the idea that I don't want to do, if they're doing this, I'm going to do a little bit less. That's the difference of the mindset here in just, 50 years in our world? Because probably 50 years in our world, because I was about 18, 19 whenever I was doing that. No, it's beneath me. You got to do it. Yeah. And that goes back to the idea of community service. How easy is it to get people to do something as community service today? It's like pulling teeth. And I go back to the deal was whenever they started the ambulance services in Lone Wolf, in Sentinel, there was a group of people that came together and established those ambulance services. Well, those folks got older. I understand that part, that getting older part. Well, they decided, well, we've done our 30 or 40 years in this service, and we started it and we did it. And then you go out and you ask some of these younger people, and when I say younger people, I'm talking 30s and below or something along that line. And you ask them, would you go and get all this training to serve your community on the ambulance? No, I don't want to do that. I don't want to serve my community. I don't want to do those things. So all these ambulances that's around, and we are in dire straits for ambulance services in our area out here because nobody volunteered to do it. And we didn't get paid for that. We would go and do all that training, do all that work. And in the middle of the night when somebody needed us, guess what we did? We bounded out of the bed and here we went. And the same goes with the fire service. All these things that are servants, being servants. We don't want to be servants. We want to be served. And I'm not going to say that's everybody out there in the world, but it's sure become a prominent thing. Jesus left heaven. He didn't have to, but he chose to be a servant. He could have come and been a king, but he didn't choose to be a king. Not in the physical sense, but in the spiritual sense. He could have got rid of the Romans. He could have cast them out. He could have done everything that the Jews wanted him to do, but he came for our salvation. And that was his service. This passage here in Mark chapter 13, talking about being prepared, can also be applied to us as we serve God. You know, we know that God is watching. We know that our Lord knows what's going on. He knows everything that we do. He even knows our hearts. But yet he expects us to fulfill his instructions, his commandments, whatever word that you want to use there. And to be watchful. Why? Because we don't know when he's coming. You've got to be ready. Now, can you just imagine if you hear those trumpets coming from the east, and here it is, Jesus is here, and you go, just a minute, I'm not quite ready for you yet. But how many will? Think about that. I'm not quite ready yet. Let's look at the next passage here in Matthew 24, talking about the wise, dependable servant. Matthew 24. And let's drop down to verse 45. Matthew 24, verse 45. The wise servant is trustworthy servant who consistently cares for his master's interest and desires when the master is away. Now, there's an old cowboy saying that if I am working on a ranch or whatever, farm, whatever, that I ride for the brand. I don't know if y'all have ever heard that. The thing is that I am committed to this organization. I ride for the brand. I do what needs to be done for the ranch to profit, for the ranch to do well. I continue to make sure everything is the way it needs to be. And if you work in the business world, wouldn't it be wise to help the business that we are working for to make a profit? Wouldn't that be a good idea? Let's say, for instance, I was working at a hamburger joint down here in town. Wouldn't I want that place to make a profit? What happens if they don't? Yeah, you lose your job. You don't have any income. And I don't know. That's the way I've always been. Is that if I was working for a company, or if I was working for a farmer, or if I was working at a ranch, I rode for the brand. I was committed to that company to make sure that it did its best. Now, here in Matthew 24, beginning in verse 45, it says, "Who then is the faithful and sensible slave whom his master put in charge of his household to give them their food at the proper time? Blessed is that slave whom his master finds so doing when he comes." That's the blessed slave. He's doing what he's supposed to do when the master comes. He's fulfilling his obligation, making sure that things are moving along as they should, as the master desires. Well, look at verse 47. "Truly I say to you that he will put him in charge of all his possessions." He's going to get a bump in position. He might even get a raise. I remember as a young man that um, if you wanted to get a raise at your job, that you had to work hard and you would be rewarded for your hard work. Or if you were working for yourself, the more hours you put in, the more money you made, so you got a raise. And today it's not like that. People expect, what's the word I'm looking for? That they expect to get more as time goes along. Entitlement. That's the word I was looking for. They're entitled. And that's sad. Jesus came and he didn't get a raise. Well, I guess he did. He was raised from the dead. Yeah, he was raised from the dead. But here's the thing. He came in a lowly place, carpenter's son. Think about that. He was a carpenter's son. Now, I can understand that just a little bit, since a lot of my family were carpenters. But he was a carpenter's son. They didn't have a lot, but he saved the world. He saved humanity. So we get that promotion if we work hard and we do what we're supposed to be doing. Now, look at verse 48. "But if that evil slave says in his heart, 'My master's not coming for a long time,' and he begins to beat his fellow slaves and to eat and drink with drunkards, the master of that slave will come on a day when he does not expect him, and an hour which he does not know." So the evil slave, this is a contrast, is not doing what he's supposed to be doing. He's not taking care of the household. He's out partying around, for a better words. He's out doing things he shouldn't be doing. Besides, it don't matter. The master's not going to be here. He's not going to see what I'm doing. But the master shows up. And this individual became abusive to the other slaves. And it notes here in verse 51, "And will cut him in pieces and assign him a place with the hypocrites, in the place where there is weeping and gnashing of teeth." That's not a place I would desire to be. But the evil slave made a choice to go against the master's trust, I guess we might say. And this individual is no longer serving the master or the master's household, but themselves and their own desires, their own lust and desires. Now, in Matthew 25, let's drop down to Matthew 25. And we're going to go to verse 14. We all know this parable. It's titled here, Faithful, Industrious Servants, Not Wicked, Lazy Servants. And we've all studied this, the talents, and I encourage you to go back and to restudy this and to look at that. But it notes here, and I'm just going to kind of note some of the things through here. It says, for it is just like a man about to go on a journey, who called his own slaves and entrusted his possessions to them. To one he gives 5 talents, to another 2, to another one, each according to his own ability, or one, each according to his own ability, and he went on his journey. So he gives these talents, or sometimes we think about it as money, sometimes we think about it as abilities, but he gives them 5 talents, 2 talents, and 1 talent. And he expects them to increase in these talents. Well, it notes here in verse 16. Immediately, the one who had received 5 talents went and traded with them and gained 5 more talents. He utilized what the master had given him for an increase. Well, in the same manner, the one who had received 2 talents gained 2 more. But he who received the 1 talent went away, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. Now, we understand as we study through this, he had excuses for what he did. But these 2, they took what they had that the master had given them, and they made the increase. The other just hid it. He wasn't putting in the effort. He wasn't doing the work. He wasn't making the increase. Verse 19. Now, after a long time, the master of those slaves came and settled accounts with them. The one who had received the 5 talents came up and brought 5 more talents, saying, Master, you entrusted 5 talents to me. See, I have gained 5 more talents. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful slave. You were faithful in a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master. See, he got that promotion. Why? Because he did the will of the master. He made that increase. In verse 22, also the one who had received the 2 talents came up and said, Master, you entrusted me 2 talents to me. See, I have gained 2 more talents. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful slave. You were faithful in a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of the master. He got a promotion. Why? Because he was fulfilling what the master desired for him to do. Now in verse 24. And the one who had received the 1 talent came up and said, Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow and gathering where you scatter no seed. And I was afraid and went away and hid your talent in the ground. See, you have what is yours. What did he start out with? He knew he failed. He had already seen what happened to the other 2. Excuses. Excuses. You know, there are times of explanation, But we sure can find a lot of good excuses to do whatever it is. You know, you come to somebody and you say, why didn't you get this job done? Well, have y'all ever heard that? Well, I didn't have, this is the big one. I didn't have time. There's a lot of folks that don't have time. Why do we not have time to do God's work? I don't have time. Why do we not have time to do our Christian duties? I don't have time. How do you schedule time? Schedule time by priorities. Yeah, what is the priority? We could readjust and schedule our time better to do what we need to do. So in this individual, he started out with excuses. And he said in verse 27, this is the master, then you ought to have put my money in the bank, and on arrival, I would have received my money back with interest. Not just hide it, but get a little interest on it. Therefore, take away the talent from him and give it to the one who has 10 talents. So he lost it all. The one that had 10 talents, he ended up with 11 talents. Verse 29. For everyone who has more shall be given, and he will have an abundance. But from the one who does not have, even when he does have, shall be taken away. Look at the outcome here. Throw out the worthless slave into the outer darkness, in the place where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. We need to utilize what God has given us as his servants. And we need to fulfill what God would have us to do. Let's quickly this morning look at Luke 17. Luke chapter 17. We're going down to verse 5. Servants who understand that it is impossible to do more than they should do. There's always something more. These servants understand that it is impossible for them to do more than they should do. No matter what they do, they only did what they should have done. And again, sometimes that brings us to the point of doing extra. In verse 5 of Luke chapter 17, it says, the apostles said to the Lord, increase your faith. And the Lord said, if you had faith like a mustard seed, you would say to this mulberry tree, be uprooted and be planted in the sea, and it would obey you. Which of you, having a slave plowing or tending sheep, will say to him when he has come in from the field, come immediately and sit down to eat? But will he not say to him, prepare something for me to eat and properly clothe yourselves and serve me while I eat and drink? Afterwards you may eat and drink. Now that doesn't sound right, does it? One is the slave, one is the master. The slave's been out toiling in the field all day long. He comes in, he's sweaty, he's tired. The master comes in, but what does he say? Fix me something to eat. Clean yourself up. Take care of me and then you. That's hard. That's hard. Because you're already tired. You've still got things to do. But the thing is that you're going to have to do those things anyway. You might as well just get them done. The word that I'm thinking of is procrastination. Anybody here ever procrastinate on anything? I do. Yeah, when I get around to it. Like, if anybody needs around to it, I have found one. They have a saw, and they are on for hire. Yeah. I'm sending her. She's been helping me do a lot of stuff at the ranch. Yeah, she's my round to it, boy. I got a round to all those procrastination jobs. Wow. Oh. She's going home, yeah. We wore her out, wore me out, we wore Linda out. Misty says, I can't believe I come down here to do all this work. I thought it was on vacation. But the thing about it is, do what you need to do. Let's quickly look at the rest of this passage. Verse 9. He does not think the slave because he did the things which were commanded him to do. He did what he needed to do. So you too, when you do all the things which you are commanded, you say, we are unworthy slaves. We have done only that which we ought to have done. No addition to what we should have done. So we'll stop there and begin and complete this lesson, Lord willing, next Lord's